Whether animal, vegetable, or mineral, the monsters in the second season of The Witcher are here and they're all really hungry. But each one has been around, stalking humanity longer than you might think.
Then the monsters aren't new, they're just new to here.
That's why I, who hath been dubbed Geralt of Trivia by the excellent YouTube commenters, am back to explore our deepest, darkest tales to uncover the real mythological origins of the creatures in The Witcher Season 2. So throw back some Witcher juice and learn Watcher Learn about monsters. We never actually get to see a wyvern in Season 2, but it is the subject of a nostalgic conversation between Geralt and Nivellen in the first episode.
Horrid creatures.
And by the way, if you were wondering why we're ignoring the giant magical man-boar in the room, it's because we already covered his kind in a previous bestiary. But you know, it's kind of telling that we're already distracted from the wyvern because they've spent centuries getting overshadowed by the homecoming queen, older sister of the flying lizard monster world, dragons. While Dragon Mania has run wild on 6 continents, the wyvern is mostly relegated to Europe, where it appears on heraldry and as soccer team mascots. Ooh, dragon, you're so scary and serious and universal. Whatever, wyverns are underrated. Truthfully, the line between wyvern and dragon was blurry in medieval bestiaries. Everything was. The ancient viper, from which the wyvern got its name and many characteristics, often looks like a dragon, and the wyvern carried that on, although sometimes weirdly it's pictured as kind of an irate capybara. It's really only more recently that we see the two species become distinct. The wyvern is typically smaller than the dragon with 2 legs instead of 4 and may have a barbed, poisonous tail. But I think what really kept bards singing about the wyvern were its quirks. Eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed how one is often eating another. That's them mating. Sort of echoing a praying mantis, a female wyvern would bite off a male's head and thus become pregnant, but they also, and this is a thing we read on a message board but a classics professor confirmed it, fled in horror at the sight of a naked man. And I feel like we've all felt that at some point or another, although maybe not the one you're watching now. Point is, don't let dragons hog the spotlight. Maybe the poor overlooked wyvern is a little more relatable. Put them in Season 3, Netflix! If there were a Venn diagram between vampires and witches, and there should be, this part right here, that would be where the Bruxa live, known as Bruxa in the show. There were similar fearsome creatures in the pre-Christian era, but Bruxa really flourished in the rural areas of medieval Portugal, right before authorities all over Europe feverishly tried to accuse anyone remotely weird or interesting of the dark practice of witchcraft. Like witches, Bruxa were predominantly women whose powers were said to come from oftentimes intimate pacts with the devil. But unlike medieval witches, who were sometimes depicted as having an obsession with the male organ, they even supposedly harvested penises from trees like this. The Bruxa possessed a vampire-like thirst for blood, and to make it worse, their favorite cocktail was the blood of an infant. Bruxa had powers galore, the evil eye, shape-shifting into birds, ants, wolves, but I didn't find evidence of a piercing scream like this in Bruxa folklore, so it's likely that a little bit of a banshee, an Irish female spirit whose screams warn of impending death, snuck into the Witcher version. Luckily for the people of Portugal, though, Bruxa did come with quirky vampire-like limitations and weak points. Much like my own weak point is heroes moving purposefully in slow motion. For whatever reason, a Bruxa only possessed its powers between 12 and 2 in the morning, which seems limiting. Iron, garlic sewn into clothes, or scissors left under the pillow of an infant could deter one, although that certainly isn't how I was taught to handle scissors. And even if you couldn't stop a Bruxa, you could get revenge on it by boiling and stabbing the clothes of a child it had killed. But overall, a Bruxa is just one of those monsters. If it lives near you, you should probably just move. Move quickly. Or at least don't go out from midnight to 2. I don't mess with trees, friend, and neither should you. Because according to most folklore, there's about an, 50-50 chance you're going to piss off a forest spirit, and you do not want that. See, the world's mythologies are teeming with unpredictable woodland beings, from the famous tragic Greek dryad to the obscure, unsettling Japanese face-bearing tree known as the Ninmenju. Let's see that full screen. Yep, okay, yep, I'm unsettled, yep. But the creature we first see surprising the Witchers in episode 2 comes from the Slavic take on the archetype.
Telling me Leshy's giant talking trees.
And since 1/5 of the world's forests are in Russia alone, we should probably pay attention to its woodland monsters. So a Leshy usually isn't seen, but when it is, it looks like an old man whistling in the forest, with curiously missing features, a pointed head shape, and oh yeah, the green mossy hair is kind of a giveaway. But they're unpredictable by nature, shapeshifters, able to assume giant and animal forms, the latter usually a bear or a wolf. They also just keep these critters around, like a Leshy entourage. Occasionally depicted as malevolent, the Leshy's attitude more often depends on a human's behavior towards the wilderness they protect, making them harder to predict. And they are indeed known as tricksters who will lead travelers astray or kidnap children, particularly unbaptized babies. Trick. They tend to be solitary, but when they do get together, look out. Leshy groups are infamous for wanton rape and pillaging, and even getting rid of them isn't a sure thing. Legend has it that acting a fool to make a Leshy laugh will get you out of trouble, or you could try escaping their forest, since outside a Leshy shrinks to the size of a mushroom. But the best way is probably not messing with trees in the first place, because you never know when they'll mess back. When we searched our ancient tomes, and well, Google, for the witch Voleth Meir, all we got was a bunch of casting news. So I give up. Case closed, not a monster from any ancient mythology. Except, wait a spell, something familiar, I can't help but... Ah! It's Baba Yaga! Voleth Meir is Baba Yaga! Curse you, you show-running enchantress, for nearly slipping one by on us. Well, get ready folks, because I'm about to remove the hood from Voleth Meir. Exhibit A. Baba Yaga is an old and prominent figure in Slavic folklore, described as either an ogress or a swamp witch. Either way, powerful magic. She looks as you might expect, with a long and sensitive nose that comes into play in many stories, but like Voleth Meir, there's some ambiguity to Baba Yaga's character.
I'm simply a guide to get you exactly what you deserve.
She can certainly throw visitors into her oven, but she often bestows gifts, as in the tale of Vasilisa the Beautiful, where the heroine is emancipated by Baba Yaga's magic skull when it charbroils her cruel family. But for Exhibit B, there's also some serious similarity in gadgets going on here, and gadgets matter because Baba Yaga is truly the James Bond of the magic Russian hag world. There's no mistaking that Voleth Meir has Baba Yaga's signature magical chicken-legged cabin-style hut. I mean, come on. And by the way, Baba Yaga's hut won't reveal its front door to just anyone, exactly like Fringilla says,
A hut with no doors.
It's true that we never see anything like Baba Yaga's famous flying mortar and pestle, but there is something about the way that Voleth Meir flies close to the ground that mirrors it. And finally, Exhibit C, there's the fact that Voleth Meir appears in 3 forms. In some tales, Baba Yaga takes the form of a triad of sisters, each, of course, named Baba Yaga. But what's more is that she's sometimes served by 3 riders in different colors. You guessed it, red, white, and black. So, in closing, good people of the internet, I submit to you that Voleth Meir is at least inspired by Baba Yaga, if not Baba Yaga herself. What? What the hell is this thing? Well, the Witcher's writing team certainly is not making it easy this season, because the Myriapod from episode 3 isn't a single monster from mythology that I could find. It's a potpourri of monster parts, which will break into pieces to understand, and oh my god, it's kind of like being a Witcher. This is so amazing. Now, monster hybrids are not abnormal. Anthropologists argue that these novel, imaginative configurations help them be remembered. It made them go viral in campfire tales. But centipedes and their kin don't often get monsterized in European mythology. The few I did find come from Asian and indigenous folklore, which honestly I feel kind of odd, because our many-legged monster's namesake, Myriapoda, is a biological family of sometimes lethally poisonous beasts that just make you feel icky, is the scientific term, I think. Like, here's one swimming. I don't want to go swimming ever again now. So now you know what the Vietnamese people around Ha Long felt when seeing Con Reet, a 60-foot armor-plated seafaring millipede cruising the bay in the 1800s. One even allegedly washed up on a beach. It was documented by an oceanographer, but it was thrown back because of its awful smell. Maybe I could be like the Kaer Morhen bard / medical examiner or something. Am I getting ahead of myself? Moving up top, our Myriapod's head is a little more familiar in monsterdom, I would guess. These are clearly the curved horns of a ram. They can be an indicator of strength. They're a feature of the Cryosphinx, a powerful lion-ram hybrid that guards Egyptian temples. But in Western mythology, they can also be a symbol of wickedness. The ultimate monster, the devil, sometimes has ram and goat horns. It might explain why this creature immediately feels powerful and evil. I feel like Vesemir would be really proud of the work I'm doing here. There are many mouth monsters like the Hydra, but they usually have distinct heads, so the Myriapod is creepy. But in Aztec mythology, we find that Cipactli, the crocodile demon upon which this world rests, had mouths at every joint. Hate to be his dentist. Finally, the hand chest thing. Oh, these hands are freaking me out, man. Be cool, you're supposed to be a witcher. If you're equally bothered, you could probably blame the Greeks for introducing the world to Hecatoncheires, 3 monstrous titans possessed of 100 hands and 50 heads each, and usually associated with natural disasters. So power, wickedness, disaster, and centipedes, all in one monster. Maybe it's best to leave this to the more, seasoned witchers. A long time ago, when the stars shine bright over the old world, monsters lived in the lakes and rivers and ponds and streams where they played and ate and laughed and scared to their heart's content. But as humans moved to places where the most water you'd ever see was a stagnant puddle, the water monsters became less relevant. City-dwelling humans searched far and wide for new stories about the murky, now shitty darkness beneath them, the sewers. So the disgusting sewer-dwelling Zoogle that we see in episode 4 is wholly a creation of The Witcher's author, Andrzej Sapkowski. But sewer monsters on the whole are not rare. Take the Bokov of Aachen, for instance. This mutated calf lived in the sewers and hot springs of the ancient city and primarily attacked drunken men by leaping on their shoulders and demanding their money. It's honestly sort of a letdown compared to a tentacle attack. But lest you think this is some medieval city thing, allow me to draw your attention to Victorian London, where the Thames helpfully returned the contents of the sewers to the citizenry with alarming regularity. There, in a time when people foraged in the sewers, that was a real thing, legend swelled of the so-called Black Swine of Hampstead, a pregnant sow who entered the sewers and gave birth to a family of pigs that grew monstrous from inbreeding and feeding off the city's filth. This was in the papers. Even modern New York City has its own sewer monster myth. Wait, no, not them. Do we even have rights for that? I meant the albino alligators that now allegedly feed and breed in the darkness after being abandoned in the 70s. But here's my thing with sewer monsters. Do we really need a story to keep us out of the sewers? You know, isn't the smell enough?
But know this. You both smell truly awful. I mean, it is like something has crawled up your asses and died.
Yep, that's enough for me. The Wild Hunt. It just gives you a shiver, doesn't it? Well, not to be the bearer of bad news after an already somber ending, but we should probably call it the Wild Hunts, plural, because that shit was everywhere. Yes, it turns out that throughout Europe, from Spain to Poland, but even hopping over to the New World where hunters flew in a canoe, people warned of ghostly lords and their often demonic hunting parties tearing through the countryside, usually during winter storms. These were popular stories.
I saw them myself, just last week, riding their skeletal horses across the southern sky, a portent of doom.
The hunt's leadership varied. everyone from the Norse god Odin on down to local kings, but there was often a curse at the start. One overzealous lord in Germany, for instance, had chased his quarry into a church and killed it there, which was a no-no for the priest who cursed him to hunt for eternity. Everyone seems to agree that having the Wild Hunt in your area meant a bad moon was arising, but the specific punishments they doled out varied. In more than a few tales, the hunt bizarrely tosses a severed leg or a shoe at witnesses. So why were they everywhere? Well, the hunt was often used as a morality tale. Either the leader or the victim clearly had spectral punishment coming to them. But some say they also fulfilled the same function as Halloween or Day of the Dead. They blur the boundary between life and afterlife. So undead or demonic, led by gods, bringer of bad luck and severed legs, and basically everywhere. Good luck next season, Geralt. Sometimes monsters go extinct. They pass from our stories, forgotten. Chernobog is one of those near extinction. Wait. Oh. R.I.P. Chernobog, we hardly knew ye. But some websites will confidently tell you that Chernobog was the black god of darkness and misfortune, locked in an internal conflict with the white god of goodness named Belobog. Chernobog, they'll say, ruled over the bleak Slavic winter. And I want to tell you all that's true because it sounds like a bitchin' origin for this guy, but here's the problem. When Christians brought writing to Slavic lands, they had an agenda. Most of them weren't really into cataloging the idolatrous Slavic god, so not only do we not have much to go on, what we do have is biased. The most credible passage we have, from a monk named Helmold, just speaks of a ceremony in which Western Slavic villagers cursed the bad god Chernobog and praised his unnamed opposite. That's it. A much later passage spoke of Chernobog being assuaged by human sacrifice. And everything else? Suspect, say scholars.
Kindly piss off.
So we may never really know much about the monster Chernobog. And given what we've seen on the show, maybe that's okay, because I will never forgive him for this. We turned the briefest glimpse of a basilisk head into a full segment last time because, well, we didn't know there'd be giant basilisk running around for 5 minutes in the final episode of this season. Ha 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 ha! Hindsight. So let's review, shall we? Although proportions vary by the tale, the basilisk is typically portrayed as some mixture of reptile and chicken, born of a rooster's egg, yes, rooster, that was incubated by a toad, which admittedly sounds really silly. But, counterpoint, isn't a T-Rex kind of a mixture of a chicken and a reptile? And like the T-Rex, the basilisk is considered a king, the little king of the serpents in Greek. But you can argue that its formidable arsenal of monstrous weapons makes it way more dangerous than these beasts and or puny dinosaurs. Like a dragon, it could breathe fire. And its hiss could kill, so could its odor. In fact, it was so very toxic that its venom was known to travel up a man's spear to kill him and the horse he rode on. And scholars thought its native habitat of Libya was actually a verdant paradise until basilisk toxins turned it into the Sahara. And we haven't even gotten to its famous death stare yet, which even rivals Geralt's. The basilisk stare was thought to be instantly fatal. Humans in antiquity went to great lengths to protect themselves from it. For instance, in Warsaw in 1587, the citizenry sent a convicted felon into a suspected basilisk lair wearing a suit of mirrored armor, like he was on the basilisk bomb squad or something. By the way, Warsaw now has this cool basilisk statue, which we thought you might like to see. Aside from Geralt, who kills them pretty easily without the aid of mirrors, the basilisk did have one powerful enemy that the dinosaurs didn't have. You may have seen it earlier. It's the weasel. Yes, despite all those instant kill weapons, a smelly weasel could somehow take out a basilisk. Some even think that this bloody mythical rivalry originated in the real-life enmity between Cobra and Mongoose. But whatever its characteristics, these peasants from Season 1 still possess a certain amount of wisdom about the basilisk.
It's been an hour. Let's get on before the beast gets hungry again.
And so, one more chapter comes to an end in The Witcher's Bestiary.
Is that what we'll be doing here then? Studying monsters.
Yes, but before we go, a question. Which monster from Season 2 would you least like to fight? Let us know in the comments. Happy hunting! Geralt of Trivia, out. There was one monster that was supposed to be in the season, but just missed the boat. The gigantic Kraken. Lurking in the seas between Greenland and Norway, it's most typically depicted as a monstrous cephalopod that's so big it can make whirlpools or look like an island, or even, it's whispered, tax the Netflix visual effects budget.